He noticed something others missed. Air raids were too broad to be effective. Large operations took too long to form. Rommel's forces adapted quickly, outmaneuvering slow-moving plans. Sterling believed that a small, highly trained team operating deep behind enemy lines could do more strategic damage than entire divisions, destroying aircraft, sabotaging fuel depots and supply routes, and turning the desert into a place where the enemy never felt safe. When he shared this idea, senior officers rejected it instantly. It sounded reckless, untested, far removed from the traditional view of warfare. Sterling's reputation didn't help. He was known more for pushing boundaries than following them, but instead of shelving the concept, he became even more determined to make it real. Sterling cut a hole in the perimeter fence of British headquarters in Cairo, slipped past the guards, and limped, still recovering from his injuries, through the corridors until he found the office of General Neil Ritchie. If caught, he would have been finished. Instead, he laid out his idea with blunt confidence. To his surprise, Ritchie listened, and then he approved it. What emerged was L Detachment, Special Air Service Brigade, a deliberately misleading name intended to fool enemy intelligence. Sterling now had permission, but very little else. His unit had almost no equipment, minimal support, and a handful of volunteers who shared his appetite for risk but lacked specialized training. Sterling shaped them personally. Harsh navigation drills, demolition, night movement, survival in the open desert. These men weren't being trained to fight like soldiers. They were being shaped into raiders. Their first mission nearly ended the entire concept. A violent desert storm hit during their insertion, scattering the unit and preventing them from reaching their targets. Lives were lost. Critics felt vindicated. The whispers that Sterling's experiment was a mistake grew louder. But Sterling refused to let the idea die. He analysed what went wrong, changed tactics, and sought help from one of the most capable groups in the desert, the Long Range Desert Group. These expert navigators gave the SAS the mobility and stealth it needed to strike far behind enemy lines. The next raid proved everything Sterling had been fighting for. Under darkness, his men slipped into enemy airfields, planted explosives, and vanished. By dawn, dozens of Axis aircraft had been destroyed. The damage was surgical, unexpected, and devastating. A small group of raiders had achieved what large-scale operations often failed to do. From that moment on, the perception of the SAS shifted. Now commanders requested more missions. Success followed success. Sterling's men struck airfields, convoys, supply depots, appearing where they shouldn't be, vanishing before the enemy could react. Their operations forced the opposition to divert troops, strengthen defences, and live with the constant fear that the desert itself might be hiding a threat. For Sterling, each mission brought validation. What had begun as a rogue idea conceived in a hospital bed had become a weapon reshaping the desert war. Yet danger remained constant. Operating deep behind enemy lines meant every mission carried enormous risk. Sterling himself was eventually captured in 1943 after a daring operation went wrong. He spent the rest of the war as a prisoner, repeatedly attempting escape, further proof of the spirit that had built the SAS. Even in his absence, the unit carried on. The foundation he laid was strong enough to outlast him. His philosophy, small teams, deep strikes, precision over spectacle, initiative over hierarchy, became a blueprint for modern special forces. By the war's end, the SAS had evolved from an unapproved idea into a proven and indispensable capability. It changed doctrine, influenced strategy, and reshaped how militaries thought about unconventional warfare. The birth of the SAS wasn't a clean or comfortable process. It was a struggle, one man pushing against tradition, against doubt, against the limits placed on him by others. Sterling didn't create the SAS through authority or rank. He created it through persistence, audacity, and a refusal to accept that things had to be done the old way simply because they always had been. And that is the real legacy of the SAS's beginning, a reminder that some of the greatest transformations in history start with a single person who sees the battlefield and its possibilities differently from everyone else.